Picture this. It is 3 a.m. You are lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and your brain is running through every possible financial disaster that could hit you tomorrow. Your car could break down. Your laptop might die. You could get laid off. Maybe your dog needs emergency surgery. Sound familiar? Here is the thing. What if I told you there is a specific dollar amount that could eliminate almost all of those midnight anxiety sessions? And no, it is not $1 million. It is not even $100,000. It is $10,000. Most people think financial milestones are just arbitrary numbers that rich people made up to make the rest of us feel inadequate. But there is actual psychology and mathematics behind why certain amounts of money create dramatic shifts in your day-to-day existence. And the first real game changer. It is way smaller than you'd expect. My name is Paul, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, human psychology, and why some people seem to glide through financial challenges while others are constantly stressed about their bank account balance. If you've ever wondered what it actually feels like to have different amounts of money saved up, and more importantly, how each milestone changes your decision-making process, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, let me paint you a picture of what life looks like without that $10,000. You know that feeling when you're at the grocery store and you're mentally calculating whether you can afford the name brand cereal or if you need to stick with a generic version that tastes like cardboard, or when your friends suggest going out to dinner and you have to come up with some creative excuse because you can admit that $25 for a meal would mess up your entire budget for the week. This is the reality for millions of Americans. Every financial decision becomes a careful calculation. Every unexpected expense feels like a potential catastrophe. You're constantly playing defense with your money instead of being able to make proactive choices about your future. Someone commented on one of my videos recently, asterisk, I am at $400. Wish me all the luck and good energy. Asterisk. Another person said, asterisk, I am at $2,100. Wish me luck. Asterisk. And then there was this one that really stuck with me, a 31-year-old guy who wrote, asterisk, had a mental breakdown, was working 60 hours a week, dating a woman who didn't have my best interest at heart, and I was always broke 100% of the time. Asterisk, took a less demanding job. I'm single, back at mom's house. Fuji agreed to let me save for a few months. Rent free, literally starting over from zero. Today is my second day at my new job. That is where most people are starting from. Not some glamorous financial freedom journey, just picking up the pieces and trying again. But here is where things get interesting. There is a specific psychological phenomenon that happens when you accumulate your first $10,000. And it has nothing to do with being able to buy expensive things. In fact, most people who reach this milestone don't dramatically change their spending habits at all. The real transformation is much more subtle and much more powerful. The first thing that changes is your relationship with risk. When you have zero savings, every decision feels dangerous. Taking a new job, moving to a different city, even planning a vacation becomes this massive source of stress because you know that one wrong move could leave you financially devastated. But when you have $10,000 sitting in your account, suddenly these same decisions feel manageable. You're not going to quit your job tomorrow and become a professional juggler, but you might finally have the confidence to ask for that promotion you've been thinking about for months. You might be willing to invest in yourself by taking a course or certification that could boost your earning potential. The safety net doesn't make you reckless. It gives you permission to think beyond just surviving until the next paycheck. And here is something that might blow your mind. Neuroscientists have found that financial security actually reduces cortisol levels. That is your body's primary stress hormone. This means reaching $10,000 does just change your finances. It literally changes how your body responds to daily challenges. Think about it this way. The last time you had a minor car problem, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that check engine light might as well be a countdown timer to financial disaster. You're immediately stressed about how you're going to pay for repairs, whether you'll need to put it on a credit card, if you'll have to borrow money from family. But when you have $10,000 saved, that same check engine light becomes a simple inconvenience. You're annoyed, sure, but you're not panicked This shift from panic to mild annoyance might seem small, but it has ripple effects throughout your entire life. When you're not constantly worried about money, you make better decisions in general. You sleep better. You're more productive at work. You're more patient with your family and friends. Financial stress affects every aspect of human behavior, and removing that stress unlocks mental energy that you can redirect toward actually improving your situation. Here is something most people don't realize about the $10,000 milestone. The majority of the benefit doesn't come from spending the money. It comes from knowing the money is there. This is what financial experts call the emergency fund effect, and it is probably one of the most underrated concepts in personal finance. An emergency fund isn't really about the emergencies. It is about the peace of mind that comes from knowing you can handle emergencies. Most people who build up $10,000 in savings never actually spend it on emergencies. Instead, they spend it on opportunities. They invest in education. They start businesses. They move to better locations, or they simply have the mental bandwidth to focus on increasing their income because they're not constantly worried about basic survival. One person left a comment that perfectly captures this. Asterisk, once I reached $30 K in savings, I realized that what used to be devastating emergencies were now minor inconveniences. Asterisk, I felt like a video game character going into a new level with 30 lives instead of 1 or 2. Asterisk, that is huge. There is also a confidence factor that is hard to quantify, but impossible to ignore. When you know you have money in the bank, you carry yourself differently. You negotiate better. You're more willing to walk away from bad deals because you're not desperate. This confidence often leads to better job opportunities, better relationships, and better life outcomes in general. Now, you might be thinking, $10,000 sounds like an impossible amount to save, especially if I am currently struggling to put away even $100 per month. But here is what is interesting about human psychology. The hardest part isn't saving the money itself. The hardest part is developing the identity of someone who saves money. Most people approach saving like it is a temporary diet. They cut expenses dramatically for a few months, save aggressively, and then burn out and go back to their old spending habits. But the people who successfully reach $10,000, they don't think of saving as a temporary sacrifice. They think of it as becoming a different type of person. This identity shift is crucial because it affects every financial decision you make. When you see yourself as someone who saves money, you start noticing opportunities to reduce expenses that you never saw before. You become more creative about finding additional income sources. You start thinking long term instead of just focusing on immediate gratification. And the beautiful thing about this process, it gets easier as you go. Saving your first $1,000 is brutal. It requires significant lifestyle changes and constant willpower. But saving your second thousand is noticeably easier because you've already developed the habits and mindset. By the time you're working toward your fifth or 6,000, the process feels almost automatic. Someone commented, asterisk, my plan was to save $10 K this year. I saved $22 K so far, asterisk. See what I mean? Once the machine starts running, momentum does a lot of the heavy lifting. Let's get practical. Thigh car repairs. Most automotive emergencies cost between $500 and $3,000. With $10,000 in the bank, car problems shift from financial disasters to minor inconveniences. Medical emergencies, even without great insurance. Most urgent care visits, emergency room trips, or minor procedures fall within this range. You are not going to cover major surgery with $10,000, but you can handle the vast majority of health issues that pop up unexpectedly. Fob loss. This is probably the scariest financial scenario for most people. $10,000 gives you roughly 3 to 6 months of breathing room to find new employment, depending on your expenses. That is enough time to be selective about your next opportunity instead of desperately accepting the first offer that comes along. But here is where it gets really interesting. Having $10,000 doesn't just protect you from disasters. It creates opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise. Maybe you hear about a certification program that could boost your salary by $10,000 annually, but it costs $2,000 upfront without savings. This is impossible. With your financial foundation, it is an obvious investment. Or perhaps a friend mentions they're starting a business and looking for a small investor. Without savings, you can only wish them luck. With $10,000, you have the option to participate in something that could potentially change your financial trajectory. I'm not saying you should invest your entire emergency fund in your buddy's cryptocurrency scheme, but having options feels incredibly different from having no options at all. Let's talk about something called decision fatigue. Every day you make thousands of tiny financial decisions. Should I buy the generic pasta or the name brand? Can I afford to grab lunch today? Or should I pack a sandwich? Is it worth paying for premium gas, or will regular be fine? Each of these micro decisions burns mental energy. And by the end of the day, you're exhausted from constantly calculating whether you can afford things. But here is what happens when you have $10,000 in the bank. Suddenly 90% of these daily financial decisions become irrelevant. You're not choosing between generic and name brand pasta because you're worried about your bank account. You're choosing based on what you actually prefer. Someone told me that the first time they walked into a grocery store after hitting $10,000 in savings, they almost cried, not because they went crazy and bought caviar and champagne, but because they realized they could focus on what they actually wanted to eat instead of what they could afford to eat. That is a level of freedom most people don't even realize they're missing until they experience it. Your sleep improves too. Studies show that people with emergency funds report significantly better sleep quality than those without savings. Turns out financial stress is one of the leading causes of insomnia. And eliminating that stress has immediate health benefits. Your relationships get better. Money stress is cited as one of the primary causes of divorce and family conflict. When you're not constantly worried about bills, you have more emotional energy to invest in the people you care about. And there is the confidence boost. You walk into job interviews differently when you know you don't desperately need the position. You're more likely to negotiate salary and benefits because you're not operating from a place of fear. Here is something that might surprise you. The person with $10,000 saved is actually closer to financial independence than someone with zero savings, even if that second person earns twice as much money. Why? Because the saver has developed the most important skill in wealth building. And that skill isn't earning money. It is keeping money. You probably know people who make six-figure salaries, but are somehow always broke. They drive expensive cars, live in fancy apartments, and eat at restaurants that charge $20 for a salad, but they have no savings whatsoever. Meanwhile, someone making $40,000 a year who has managed to accumulate $10,000 in savings is actually in a stronger financial position because they've proven they can do the one thing that actually builds wealth: spend less than they earn consistently. The difference isn't income. It is mindset. Here is a reality check that might motivate you. The average American spends over $3,000 per year on coffee, dining out, and convenience purchases. That is not even counting major expenses like car payments or entertainment subscriptions. If you could redirect just 1/3 of that spending toward savings, you'd have your $10,000 in less than 3 years. I'm not suggesting you should never enjoy a coffee or eat at a restaurant, but most people have more flexibility in their budgets than they realize. The difference between someone who builds savings and someone who doesn't usually comes down to awareness and intentionality, not income level. $10,000 is just a number in your bank account. It is a complete psychological transformation that touches every aspect of your life, from sleeping better at night to walking into job interviews with actual confidence instead of desperation. This milestone creates a domino effect that most people never see coming. If you are currently staring at a bank balance that looks more like a phone number from the 1950s, don't panic. Start small, stay consistent. And remember this: the person you become while saving your first $10,000 is infinitely more valuable than the money itself. Your future self will thank you for starting today.